Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Canyon Meadows Movie Theater. This is the best theater in Calgary. It is, it just truly is. For a variety of reasons. Not only is it the place where you can actually watch, like, Oscar-winning Oppenheimer, second most popular film of last year, months after it's done in other theaters, so you get to catch stuff before it's gone. But they're a repertory theater now where you can watch like Back to the Future and Jaws and the Star Wars movies. They had an Alien film festival here just a few weeks ago that went over extremely well. All these old guys like me that are bringing their teenage kids and in some cases grandkids out to watch what the original Xenomorph looked like. And so Canyon Meadows is awesome. They have the best snacks, they have the best drinks, and I'll tell you, I will take politics and popcorn over politics and Prosecco or pints and politics any day. So I love this. Thank you all for being here, and thanks to Canyon Meadows for hosting us. My name's Rob Smith. The last time I was here, I was timed, and I had cards that said when I had to stop, and the microphone would cut out, and that's not going to happen, but it could if I go too long anyway, which bores you. So I'm not going to take a real long time because there's lots of folks you do want to hear from tonight, including the gentleman who's going to kick us off and bring forth this discussion. But part of the reason why I'm really excited to be here tonight is that back in January, when Premier Danielle Smith made the announcement about parental rights, impending legislation, and this was a very proud moment, I think, for not just people that were in the United Conservative Party, not just people that were in government or caucus, but I think for Albertans on the whole, because I think that we're at this interesting place right now where Albertans are largely identifying with the principles that the United Conservative Party is championing. And I think that's because the United Conservative Party is made up of the majority thinkers of the province of Alberta and what is in the best interest of all Albertans, whether we're from South, Central, or Northern Alberta, anything like that. And so the role that you all play in that, I thank you for doing that. You know, whether you want to say we're on the right side of history or the right side of angels. When I listened to Danielle Smith and what she had to say, I wasn't worried about whether this was being a tolerant statement because it didn't seem to me that it was about that. It was actually about recognizing the rights of parents who are the most important influence in the lives of their children and the most important guides in the lives of their children, from a legal perspective as well as from an ethical and a moral one. And our Premier spoke not just with authority and with leadership, but with empathy and with concern. And I was extremely proud of our Premier when she made that statement, as I have been on so many other occasions. She continues to impress me each and every day that goes by. And I can share with you that some internal polling that the United Conservative Party has reached out to get, which we can't actually make public because it's internal polling. But what I can tell you in this room is that 59% of Albertans right now are United Conservative Party supporters and supporters of Premier Smith. And this has all been in the wake of the announcement about parental rights. So folks, we are on the right side of history, and for that I want you to give yourselves a round of applause. You know, I think back as a Gen Xer, as a product of the 80s, in 1985 I was in grade 11, grade 12, and I remember these lyrics. In Europe and America, there's a growing feeling of hysteria, conditioned to respond to all the threats in the rhetorical speeches of the Soviets. Mr. Khrushchev said, "I will bury you." Well, I don't subscribe to that point of view. It's such an ignorant thing to do if the Russians love their children too. Well, I mean, the Cold War's gone, Soviet Union's gone, Germany reunified. But the rhetorical speeches that are filled with hatred, they continue to exist. And it feels to me like the conservative-minded folks in Alberta today are not anywhere on a political spectrum. It isn't about right of center or far right. It's just about doing the things that are the right things to do because they are the right things to do. And tonight is going to be about celebrating all of that and hopefully giving you some of the tools to combat back some of those rhetorical speeches that are filled with, there is no question about it, hate. And I don't get the hate coming from people that are perceived as being more right than left. It seems to me that it's pretty much coming the other way around. The individual that brought tonight together, and is an extraordinary leader, one of the greatest constituency association presidents that we have, is your own Calgary Lougheed's Darrell Komick. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Darrell.
Thanks, Rob. Aloha. Aloha. I'd just like to welcome everybody who's here tonight, the 2,000 people that are viewing us online and the 225 people who attended tonight. Thank you all for attending. It's particularly relevant this evening to have the UCP president. A lot of people during our time to develop tonight's program, we dealt with a lot of issues, and it seems to me a very challenging and difficult time to actually just want to have a conversation. And to all of the NDP folks who bought a ticket, all 27 of you, thank you so much for being here. And to everyone else who decided that they would want to understand and learn. And tonight is not about making judgment one way or the other. We're here to provide you educational opportunity. I will dispense with my usual wit and will not be drawing out people out of the crowd other than Cheryl, who's here in the very front row, in case something does happen. I will say for the personal safety that of people here today that the Legislative Assembly Security Detail is here this evening. They will remove people from the building who cannot be tolerant to the evening as it is going along. To all of you who wanted to learn, we're glad that you're here, and we are grateful for the support of the party and, of course, the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. So, Rob, I heard your opening comments, and I think what's fascinating for me when I get into the details of organizing is that there are always these voices. And I used to think there were voices in my head. Because, you know, sometimes you get in a circumstance where you're really, really uncomfortable and you get upset. I mean, it happens. I think we're human. But what I learned during the last 4 years in particular is that there were so many pressures on families. There are so many pressures on trying to understand what's going on. Because it's the great unknown. What used to be logical, we could say use common sense, it's illogical. So it's so refreshing to see you here tonight. It's so refreshing for you to bring greetings and for you to represent what is about 88,000 members across Alberta and a growing number of supporters every day. So thank you for your leadership. Rob is an amazing leader. We've been through some very trying times, but the unity that is being created with Rob and the board of directors is heartwarming, and our access to understanding the policies. And I think that's really where we're at, you and me, is we wanted to embark on or impress on everyone this evening that the United Conservative Party has values. And those values are represented in the policies. And maybe, Rob, just share with people here the experience from the last AGM.
You know, I think it's very appropriate at this point in time to recognize that both Raymond Strom, who's our VP of Policy and Governance on the provincial party, as well as Irma Roberts, who's a Calgary director, are here. And I'd like you to put your hands together for them if you would.
And Pete Whitler is here too.
Is Peter as well? You know, Ray Strom, as the grandfather, the godfather, whatever you want to refer to him as of policies within our party, is a representative of a group that is such a significant portion of our party, because conservatives seem to really, United Conservative Party members, seem to really jones on policy. Like, they get really, really passionate and jacked up about the prospect of getting together at the annual general meeting to discuss policy. Now, Our annual general meeting last November had over 4,000 people at it. It was the largest political gathering in Canadian history. And the biggest thing that happens at that event is the discussion of, last fall it was 30 governance policies on Friday night, and then 30 policies on Saturday afternoon. That is advice or guidance or leadership influence to the government, to our caucus members from the United Conservative Party, that it indicates to them that the membership of the party thinks this is where public policy should be headed. And it's incredibly important. And I'll tell you, one of the things that Premier Smith said the very day after that annual general meeting, and I think I've mentioned this to Darrell, but the Premier said, you know, Rob, at ensuing AGMs, we need to have probably a full afternoon session where I, as Premier, come on stage with our House Leader, and we talk for about a half an hour, and then we bring all the members of Cabinet on stage, and we provide an update to the membership as to the status of every one of the policies that was approved in the fall of 2022 and the fall of 2023. Our Premier doesn't really care about the policies before that because she wasn't a leader, but she is that concerned and cares that much about the policies from her time as leader. So if you are interested in that report card, and then of course in creating the requirements for the next report cards by having influence on policy this fall, please register to attend the AGM that's going to be in Red Deer. We are hearing rumblings that 6,000 may be a conservative number.
That's going to be November 1st and 2nd in
Absolutely, Darrell.
Rob, thanks for coming tonight. Big round of applause for Rob Smith. I couldn't help but notice that Chris has given you a preview of what I'm about to say. So, give him the next slide. So up here is a really interesting sign. I got this forwarded to me. It's a meme. If you read it up there, it says, fear has two meanings. Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. The choice is yours. And I put that up here because you have to understand that there is a tremendous amount of risk to people who participate in public events. This particular venue right here received 600 hateful phone calls and emails to try to cancel the freedom of speech. Now, these comments are all organized from one university professor in Edmonton at Grant MacEwan College or University. So you have to realize that this is organized hate. Next slide. So people say, and I just want to point out here that the two people, you can read them for yourselves, Lindsay Porter, and down over here this says Shauna Thompson, and we have lists of hundreds of people, okay? What happens is people do this in the quiet of their home, typing in the dark, or on their phone, or at work at a union job, or wherever it might be. And the tricky part about this is that we're trying to have a conversation. And when I look at the Criminal Code of Canada and I look up the actual definition of hate, this falls in there. Okay, anytime you identify a group, you give it ill will, I mean, you can go through the whole technical jargon. I see a lawyer came in the room, Irma's here, she could tell us. But the point being is that in order to have respectful dialogue, you have to be able to elevate yourself up from shouting, like you would at your kids sometimes. Or just actually, or your workmates. But I'm just saying, it has its place. But it doesn't have its place in civil discourse. So this evening we are going to dispense with hateful speech, and we are going to try to have a conversation up here about education. And I think that's the most important thing. This is about parental rights and your role in education. It's not about a whole bunch of other things that are involved in the particular bill that's being proposed. So that's where we're going to go. Now, okay, there we go. There is a book that's available in the lobby. Tonight's evening is based on the book, The Lingrals and the Combustants. And you'll have to read the book to see what that is. So, give me the next slide. Or the next one. Or the next one. Okay, there we go. And the next one. So, once upon a time, there were lingrals and combustants. And when you read the book, you will find that there was a time and place when people could find civil discourse and that they could actually have a conversation. By having those conversations and building community, it was enough to give them prosperity, tolerance, and understanding, because people could have a coexistence with each other while understanding the strengths and weaknesses of other people, and not to take advantage of the weaknesses of those around them. So tonight's objective is to have a civil discourse on the issue of parental rights. We want to talk about the responsibility of parents that they have for their children and what rights that the parents should have in today's society. We're going to break up the evening into 5 segments. This was segment number 1. The next segment is going to be parents speaking for children. There we go. Then we're going to talk about cancel culture, weaponizing the bureaucracy, and of course, what's happening in the classroom. This particular program here is 75 minutes long, just so you know. And unlike Shane Getson when he was here and talked for 45 minutes in a 15-minute time slot, and it was captivating. You can watch it on our YouTube channel at &Alberta Politics. It's a very interesting thing on metallurgy, but not what we were there for. So tonight's presenters, we have many of them. We'll talk to Blaine Badiuk, Torry Tanner, Kim McBride, and John Hilton-O'Brien. And I will say one thing, we get the most hate mail for Torry Tanner. And ironically, Torry Tanner, of course, young lady ran in Lethbridge West. She stepped down when she had made what apparently at the time was a controversial video. Turns out it was the truth. Little problem with that. But the point being is that we want to have these conversations, and keep in mind, the people you're going to see tonight and talk to, some of them will make you feel uncomfortable. And what I want you to know is that uncomfortable feeling you have is your ability to listen and to learn, and to try to demonstrate the understanding that you would have if you were up here talking to you in the crowd. Okay, so just trying to give the lay of the land and what we would like to have. So let's welcome the first person we're going to have a conversation with tonight, Blaine Badiuk. So Blaine's a student at the University of Lethbridge. I know, brand new microphones. Blaine, I will introduce you. You can then maybe introduce me. But here's what I know. Blaine says she's transgender. I just want you to know that up front in case you didn't. And we have had many conversations. Our first interaction, maybe just move that out of your way. Stand. We've had many conversations. It started at the AGM. There was conversation there. There was conversation at the last town hall we had. And what I really want to get the conversation with you today is, you know, we hear this whole thing of parental rights, and we hear the protests. You read many of the hateful things that you're saying. And I thought maybe it'd be helpful for the audience to hear your perspective on what people are saying.
Yeah, thank you, Darrell. Thanks for the invite, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight and having this conversation. That's what we do on this side of the aisle. Right? My whole sketch is conversations, not cancellations. And I was really disappointed to see, the hatred that came from that side. And I have many friends in the community who have, been the receiver of hate after they've come out in support of Premier Smith's policies. And, put on a microscope on the education side of it. And I think it comes from the premise that, parents have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to do what's best for your children, and that means you have the leeway to make certain decisions on behalf of your children. And what we know is the vast majority of parents are going to be loving, supportive, parents who just want what's best for their children. You might have questions, and that's okay. We shouldn't be canceling you because you have questions. You should have questions. Education is a partnership between the teacher, the student, and the parent, and you need to be involved in that conversation. So that's why parental rights comes with that responsibility as well.
So, give her a big, that's perfect, right? So when someone says to you, well, there's exceptions, and really kids who are 8 should be able to make their own decisions, or they're 12, or they're getting to be 14. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that those kids should be able to go to a third party and not involve the parent in the conversation, and then to have that third party validate those kids in a way that pulls them from their parents?
Absolutely not. Just absolutely not. We know that the #1 indicator of successful children is an involved parent, ideally involved parents, and a supportive family around them. So this, any idea that any child should be able to make these massive decisions alone is ignoring that foundational principle. And I can understand where some people are worried that they may not have support at home. But why start on that premise when we have existing legislation to deal with in those rare cases? And I'm saying really rare. Because we're seeing an issue where a lot of teenagers are identifying as trans, and they may not actually be, and that worries me specifically, and having a parent will help that.
And do you think that that comes from pressure? Do you think that's a peer pressure, or do you think that there is programming that's occurring in schools that give kids a premature idea of questioning their sexuality?
I think a little bit of both, maybe.
Sorry, a tough question,
Yeah.
right? But
I think that almost every teacher I know, and I was going to school to become a teacher, they're excellent educators and they follow the best practice they can, and we know. But there is a social pressure, definitely on the TikToks. That is the #1 area where I'm seeing, especially young teens, fall into the algorithms, and they just read all this stuff, and then they get deep-ended and told that this is who they are. And no, that's not what it is. They need any young person who is potentially having gender dysphoria. They need counseling first and foremost. That was a vital part of my transition, and still on. And then we can talk about the medical side of it. But in the schools, I think a lot of people don't know how to talk about this. We hear, for example, it's a different brain than your body. And being trans is way more than that. That is an oversimplification. And frankly, these young kids just can't fully understand that, nor should they be able to. And I think sometimes we're pushing things too early for these kids, that they can't really understand it. They're just kids.
So do you think the Premier, she made her statement, she's talked on the radio, you've heard it, you've processed it, you've talked to your friends about what her statements were. Do you think that she had a fair and reasonable position that satisfies the balance between today's society and parental responsibilities?
Yeah, well, we have to wait to see exactly what the legislation is. I haven't seen it yet.
I'm just saying what she said out loud.
Exactly, and I think specifically what she said on the Ryan Jesperson show just last week when asked about some stuff happening in the video, and she said she was concerned. I'm like, that's the Smith I know, that's the Smith that I love and want to be our premier, because that's not the intent of the policy. And the intent is, as she laid it out, was like, if that young person, that teenager specifically, is going to make that decision to come out to the school community, well, everyone else in the school community knows, well, you better believe that child's parent is going to find out one way or the other. And I would rather it come from that child in the first place than have it hear from hearsay. And I think that's the goal of the policy, and is to give them that support Combined with the Townsend pilot program, I think that's an excellent addition. We need that, and I'm looking forward to seeing that be rolled out.
Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause. Blaine, Badiuk. Thanks for coming, Blaine. So our next presenter is someone I just called out earlier, Torry Tanner. Torry, I just want you all to know that everybody who came here tonight has come on their own volition. We have not paid them. They paid admission to come in here tonight. There was no exchange of goods or services or promises to have the speakers come this evening. It was all on their own because they wanted to provide you a perspective and information that you could either question or understand. So, hello, Torry.
Hello, Darrell.
It seems that of all of the people that are here tonight, you have taken probably some of the most public abuse.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, okay, I understand that spades are shovels, okay? You had a lot going on in your head as a candidate for the UCP in Lethbridge West.
Mm-hmm.
We know that nomination processes, it's a blood sport. And it's tough because you're trying to convince your own party members of a perspective that you share, and you're trying to distinguish yourself amongst the herd on what are usually incredibly timely and relevant issues. Sometimes the voter's ready for them, sometimes they're not ready for them. Can you maybe share with everybody your experience leading up to your comments that were put into the media and just help everyone with your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Darrell. So I have to say first that 2 years ago, I knew absolutely nothing about politics, didn't want to know, didn't want to get involved, and that's the place I wanted to stay. But my nephew, who has always been political, always tried to educate me the best he could, kept at me. Finally, I agreed to buy my very first UCP membership ever, my first political membership ever. And I attended the 2019 AGM. Well, that was an experience, I have to say. I can remember sitting in that room and listening to about an hour of policy discussion and voting. And I tell you, I would way rather watch paint dry than sit there and endure that. So
oh, come on, the policies are captivating.
I did the honorable thing.
Ray is right there. You're insulting Ray.
Sorry, Ray. I'm going to redeem myself soon. But I did the honorable thing in that moment, and I left to go to the bathroom and never came back. Honestly, true story. I didn't come back until the fall of 2023 when all of a sudden I was like excited to go to this AGM, and I tell you, like Rob mentioned, it was electric and I was on fire. But how it got to that point was in December of 2022, some friends came to me and tried to convince me to come and run as a candidate in the constituency of Lethbridge West. Now, after a whole lot of prayer and a lot of contemplation, I decided, okay, well, hey, why not? By then, like 2020 involved a lot of us and made us wake up and realize that, hey, if we don't get involved, then we can't complain about the mess we're in, and myself included. So I decided, okay, well, I'm just gonna dive in head first, and that's what I did. And through the nomination campaign, what my team and I did was we put together a series of videos that would help to help the membership get to know who I am and what I stood for. And also at that time, we actually brought down John Hilton-O'Brien, and he spoke at an event we hosted, and I started the process of actually understanding what was going on in our schools. And I sat there riveted to every word John said, because I was fascinated and horrified all at the same time that these things were happening in our schools. And then after that, I started looking into it and ended up talking to Kim McBride, who furthered my education on the actual books that were in schools. And so I consequently did a video because I was so motivated to do something and educate people. And these are the words that were so controversial in the video. I said something to the effect of, we're seeing increasing incidences of pornographic material showing up in schools. And worse yet, we're learning of teachers who are counseling their students to change their gender identity without parental consent or even knowledge. That wasn't appreciated by the left, not at all. It won me a ticket to get my face plastered all across the nation, and major attacks come. When Darrell said that Canyon Meadows was attacked, well, I understand what that's like because they came after me big time. And they are nasty. But what it did for my campaign team was it motivated us big time. If you understand marketing, if you're in business, you understand that negative publicity is exponentially better than positive publicity. So we were capitalizing on that. What I wasn't prepared for was my own party coming after me. Now, I say that, but I understand now that it wasn't the whole party. It wasn't the whole government. It was a small faction within the UCP, and they were of the old guard. Some of them are still there, and it's important that we get involved to make sure that we have our grassroots represented within the government. So, absolutely. So some of the comments that would come back to me, there two of them. Specifically, where one is, it's not happening in the school because my child hasn't told me. Unfortunately, that's not usually the case. With myself, the education came by way of my own niece, who is in the Catholic system in Lethbridge. And after my video went viral, my niece and her friends were talking, and she admitted to my sister that she said, you know, Auntie Torry was right. There's a lot of pornographic stuff in her school. And so my sister quizzed her, and she found out that in the name of proving to kids how evil pornography was, one of the religion teachers in their school actually regularly showed her students pornography. Yeah.
So this is true stuff.
No, I'm just making it up.
I'm just saying.
I'm just making it up as I go along.
But when we get the media and we get social media bites, it's always portrayed as if you made it up. And no one there can, other than the 8 seconds of attention span that generally the social media ad has, nobody wants to know the truth. And so today, this is, I think, the first time you've actually said this in public.
To this extent, yeah, for sure. So after learning from my niece what was going on, a couple weeks later, she brought home a real nugget, because we were actually starting to look for 10 really X-rated books that we found out from Action for Canada. And we were looking actively in the schools for them. And my niece, she brought home one for us. Her teacher had given her one of the books on this X-rated list and asked her to do a book report on it. My sister called me in a panic, and she's like, you're never going to believe this. And so this book is called The Glass Castle. And you'll be interested in this. My niece, for all intents and purposes, the world would see her as black. Her mom is white, her father is black. And this book is rampant with racism and sexual violence and bigotry. The list goes on. By the way, if you want to understand what these books, some of what these books are, go to Action for Canada. They have so much information on their site. So that helps to educate us. And we also found out that because this book came from a teacher's private classroom library, that we had no access to that. We didn't even know what was in the classroom, right? So that's another important thing to keep in mind, is that it's important to go to the classrooms as a parent. Volunteer because you're not necessarily going to know what's in there. Another common comment that came at me was, well, are you sure, that pornography is a really strong word. Really, is it actual pornography? Well, usually I'd say, I will send you some excerpts of the book, you decide. And 100% of the time, they come back to me horrified, because it's way beyond what they ever imagined to be in our school system. And what happens is, this is most often called cartoon pornography. They're not depictions of real people, they're cartoons. which somehow makes it better, I'm not sure. But it's really easy. You don't need to take my word for it. You don't need to have an opinion about it. All you need to do is go to the Criminal Code of Canada, and it will tell you, it'll give you a definition of what pornography is. Here's the problem. We can't get a prosecutor to take action because there's a defense in the criminal code for education. So what we've done is we've provided a way for teachers to become pedophiles. It's not saying every teacher, I'm not saying every classroom, but it opens a door for teachers to do this. And some walk right through that door. And that's the problem, is we have what's the recourse? And if this happens, students don't usually tell their parents. They're too embarrassed, they have cognitive dissonance. My niece had that. She even shared that in the previous year, her teacher had made the class read the book out loud, which was worse than the Glass Castle. So they're not talking about it. So it's important that we talk about it. So what can you do? Well, you can educate yourself, that's really important. And I mean, you can read the list of things here, but I think a lot of you know what you have to do. You have to get involved. You have to go into the classrooms, you have to talk to the kids, but even talking to them isn't necessarily going to give you the information you're looking for. Look for their behavior, because often it's in their behavior that we get the answers. And also, we have to get involved politically. We have to get on school boards. We have to volunteer on school councils and do whatever we can to spread the word as to what's out there. So many parents still don't understand what's happening in the school system. And they're tired, they're busy, and they're over-involved. So it's tough to get involved in another thing, right? But we need to do it, otherwise we end up in the mess that we're in. So I will leave you with this word of encouragement, though, is that, even after I was relieved of my duties, it gave me an opportunity to stay involved. And I had a pastoral couple of friends in Lethbridge who really encouraged me and prayed for me and said, don't let your heart grow cold and don't stop fighting. And I took that to heart. And after the attacks came on me, so many things happened, and we were able to bring people together across the province and we went through as many school libraries online as we possibly could. We pulled together all the books that we could find, and there's way more than 10, there are hundreds of different books that are inappropriate to be in our school libraries. We put them all together on a spreadsheet, and then we bombarded Mr. Nicolaides' office with emails and letters and phone calls and tweets. And I'm certain I don't know all of the letters he was sent, but we tried to educate him and the Premier's office on what was going on. And we even then, thanks to Calgary Lougheed, we were able to get a resolution passed at the AGM that dealt with those inappropriate materials in schools, and now it's policy. So that was a huge victory as well. And then, but the real nugget came at the beginning of December when Demetrios was at a local Calgary constituency AGM, and I found out about it and said, ask him this question. And so they did. And Demetrios had done an about-face. Instead of washing his hands of it, he announced that, yes, they were aware of what was going on and they were going to do something. So hallelujah, that was a turning point for us. And then of course, February 1st, when Danielle made her public statement, that was a huge, huge victory to know that the government was going to actually do something. So my encouragement to you is, you know what, when you're faced with that mountain, you think that it's insurmountable, it may be for just you. But together, if we come together and we work together and we act together, like Henry Ford, you got that one? Good job. Actually said, we can make a difference. We actually have the power as grassroots to hold the government accountable. And that's really important. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Torry Tanner, everybody. What a story. Now you heard it firsthand. No degrees of separation between what happened and what was experienced by Torry. Our next guest is Kim McBride. Kim is a knowledge expert on educational materials. She can speak with authority through her research, her speeches, her writings, and her willingness to speak across Alberta and outside of Alberta on the top of the impact of SOGI in the classroom. So please welcome Kim McBride.
Oh, thank you very much, Darrell. Okay, good. I don't want to have to be turning around to look where my slides are at, so I'm going to keep it here. Yeah, so I'm actually with Action for Canada, so thank you, Torry, for mentioning that. And I'm so grateful that you, along with tens of thousands of others across the country, are taking that education and then putting it into practice. That's the point of our grassroots organization we started, particularly during what we saw as overreach and tyranny during the COVID. That's where we kind of rose up, and we're serving our fellow Canadians to deal with what are your rights, how do we push back, how do we get involved in politics, not just politics, but just, you know, the moral and cultural sphere, and not just leaving it to those knowledge experts. So I think it's so funny when it's when I'm the SOGI expert, I'm like, oh, good God, no. But I do have a lot of knowledge, unfortunately, because I have had to look at the materials, if you even call them that, so that we can speak authoritatively. It's not just making it up here. And unfortunately, we have to look at that information. We have to bring it out into the light, and we have to say, okay, is this okay, people? Let's have a conversation. And it's really sad that we can't just have a normal conversation about it without it getting spun and turned into, oh, you hate this person, you hate that person. It's all, and you saw those comments, this is a hate-filled whatever. It's like, let's just talk about some facts here. But there's a reason for that, because it's actually a psychological technique. And so, you know, it's not a surprise. And when you look at it, and as you watch these kind of techniques being used in various different theaters, then you spot it the second it shows up. You're like, oh, there it is, they're using that technique again. Oh, they're using fear, they're using whatever. So, and when I talk about the they, we definitely have an understanding of who that they might be. So Action for Canada, as you said, and I'm just, you know, just put it out there transparently for you all. We're a Christ-centered, you know, Bible-believing organization dedicated to preserving the rights and freedoms of Canadians. We believe fundamentally that our nation was founded on Judeo-Christian values, and that makes us, sets us apart from totalitarian regimes. And in fact, you have the freedom to believe or not to believe as an individual, and you have a responsibility within society to engage in the democratic process, and that has actually been the strength of our foundation, and it is definitely the thing that is being undermined and attacked. Now, it doesn't mean everybody has to be a Christian to be in Canada, but it just means that the values that are inherent in our in the supremacy of God and the rule of law, that's like right at the top of our Constitution, it means something. And so I just really want to put that out there as you know, something important that people understand. You just accept it and work within it. Okay, so there's 4 key campaigns that we work on, and I'm going to go through these really fast. Action for Canada has seen this. You know, we often, people say, okay, well, this is like, you know, where's this coming from? It just seems evil, and it's, you know, and there's just a lot of confusion around, well, where did this come from? All of a sudden, I was living my life, and then there's pornography in the school. I said, what? And so I'll go through some of that, and it's about that weaponization, because it's very strategic. So we have 4 main campaigns that we work on. Comprehensive sexual education, which is known as SOGI 123 here in Alberta. It started in BC in 2017. around there, and then it quickly leaped into Alberta in around 2018. I might be off a little bit on those dates, but it's relatively new. Before this time, when I was involved in all this, I was a teacher in the school system here in Calgary, and it was like, wait, what? SOGI? Who's the SOGI team lead? Like, what are you talking about? And it just hit even the staff. Like, all the teachers are like, all of a sudden we have a SOGI team lead, and it just came out of nowhere. It's like, what is this about? Do we have anybody that's really struggling? And yes, there was people there was children that definitely had gender dysphoria, gender identity issues in general. I worked in a junior high, and I talk about identity issues. Like, every single teenager has identity issues. So, you know, it was just definitely strategic and powerful, and it came in. So yes, there's lots of great teachers, but they're dealing with this stuff that's coming in. So we also talk about the the UN, or the Unsustainable Developmental Goals with the cities. We're trying to activate churches, faith communities, and pastor networks, because there's a real attack on just, like I said, Christianity and in religion, really, and then parenting and schooling, homeschooling. We're really pushing for parents to take control of the education of their children once again, because of what is going on in the public system and even in the private system. Okay, so the next thing is, what's the problem? Well, I'm only going to focus on the SOGI and the education piece. The problem is, we've got almost like this hydra, you know, this beast that is all from a single source and has multiple tentacles coming out of it, or multiple faces. Okay, we can go on to the next one. So there's this problem, and what is that problem? The problem is that there is a very real push for a globalizing control over the planet. And if you don't believe me, I don't know where you were in the last 4 years. Okay, so let's just start right there. There's such a coordination on the globe for power, control, and I won't go down that path, but the global control is what they're going for through local governance. Bypass the Canadian Constitution, bypass the provincial jurisdictions, and get right down to the municipalities, the school boards, because they're the closest to the people. This is a Marxist technique. It was done, it's a Maoist technique, also done in China in the Cultural Revolution. We have it going on here in Canada right now. It has to be confronted and at least addressed and talked about. So there is a weaponization of bureaucracy that's happening. And what does that mean? It means that these non-governmental organizations, like the UN, become captured, weaponized, or strategically used in order to cut in and undermine the foundations of typically Western liberal democracies. So they want to get a hold of the people. So they're doing this through the children. So the next one here, that weaponizing of the various theaters. So when I say theater, I mean like theater of war. We're talking, this is warfare. It's psychological at this point, and maybe they can come roll right in and not even have to fire a bullet, because they'll just capture certain strategic institutions. School boards and elected officials, even regulatory bodies, we see that with the doctors, financial institutions, surveillance cities, also known as smart cities, 15-minute cities. Let's do land use bylaw. Let's just do, you know, everybody is common zoning. I don't know if you heard that's going on in Calgary, right? Everybody, doesn't matter if you put a skyscraper beside you, because it's all common zoning and nobody gets to have input anymore. Yeah, media, legal, business, and this part here, the partnerships between ESGs and DEIs. These are all the buzzwords that come with this Marxist march, as I put it. And they're going for the family, because the family is the foundation of any society, strong families. And that the best place for children to grow up and be raised in, the best ideal, is mom and dad together with them. Now, that's not always the case for everybody, as we know, and of course that's not the ideal, and of course we have to support people, but the fact is that's what people are going for, so that's why we protect families. So we'll just go through those real quick if you just want to put all of those up. Indoctrination in schools, so this is where it's coming in. It's coming in through the 17 UN Sustainable Goals, global citizens and agents of change. These are the buzzwords that they use. And now that you know a little bit more about it, you can look for it in all the literature that comes out. The CSE, here in Alberta it's SOGI, in Ontario it's WIN, in the Maritimes it's Beyond the Basics. But it's the same Hydra. Again, it's the same beast. Shift the name, same lingo when you look at all of their toolkits. And by the way, haven't you heard toolkits? Chrystia Freeland always has a tool, right? To get more into your pockets. I'm just saying, she's used that word a lot. The tools. We have tools in our tool belt. I'm like, I'm tired. Take her tool belt away from her. What other tools has she got in there, right? Sorry, I digress. The other thing that they're moving along is critical race theory. And again, that's a divisive technique to pit white Christian males way down here, and everybody else is the oppressed class, and they get to be flipped to the top. So it's part of that intersectionality. It's a whole study in science. It's all through our universities, and of course, they're teaching the teachers, and the teachers go in and become activists on this. And it's all Marxist. UNDRIP is also one where they are, and that's for another topic, but that's where they're actually weaponizing Indigenous people with Indigenous issues, like the issues that really do need to be addressed. They get pushed aside so that they can be used and weaponized for their objectives. So there's a war on children. Bottom line, I just wanted to have that slide up there so you could see that documentary. All of this is on our website, so it's worth the deep dive. You have to do the time to do it. You have to give yourself the time to research this stuff, and then you will take action like Torry did. You will be motivated. The next one, I know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry it's going to be on the big screen, but that's seriously what is happening. They are weaponizing a particular people group and minority group, and they're weaponizing the LGBT community. Lots of people are saying, I want LGB without the T. You know, I don't want LGBT in the Q, because the Q means queer, and the queer means everything is queered, and there's a whole queer theory on that. And so that's real. That comes in, that has nothing to do with the people. It has to do with weaponizing the ideology. And look at what that precious little kid, he was just like appalled. So the next one, what are they doing? They stole their innocence, because the belief system here is that children are sexual from birth. That is from Alfred Kinsey, who put that forward. Do you believe that they are sexual from birth? No. Like, come on. Who said that that was like, what do they call judicial notice on that? Who gave judicial notice that children are sexual from birth? We never had the conversation. And because that's the foundation of the belief, they want to sexualize children from the earliest possible stages. And that way it forms and breaks up their identity according to their purposes. So they get to rob the future. If you get the children, you get the future. Very communist in its rhetoric. The next one, they are also having this war on the vulnerability, on the vulnerable. So gender dysphoric children that may or may not be may or may not be trans-identifying. But they are, like we heard earlier, they're fast-tracked onto this path because it suits a narrative. And so, without any due process, any due consideration. Okay, so the next thing here is that there's a war on parents. Okay, and so then, like I said, the family is what they're trying to break apart because that holds a society together, because parents will die for their children, right? If you can break children away from their parents, they're sitting ducks, and every tyrannical government has used that technique in the past, and there's all kinds, left and right, it doesn't matter, fascism and Nazism, all the way over to communism. It's the same tyranny, whatever way. So I want you to see this like little diagram here. We often have the assumption it's you and your child and the world. Okay? So what they're actually trying to do is take you and your child and separate you. And then you'll see where the school goes right in the middle there. That's what's the problem in education. So you as a parent, you must fuse yourself to the child and know everything that goes on with your child when you turn them over to the doctor, the psychologist, or the teacher at school. There is no knowledge expert better than you as the parent over your child. Okay? You know your child. You must be involved. but they want to break you out of there, and they're actually making legal grounds, they're moving into legal grounds to do that. And like even conversion therapy ban. Of course, nobody wants anybody tortured and converted against their will on any sort of therapy, but now we have conversion therapy. We have maybe people that are identify as gay, lesbian, but nope, they must be born in the wrong body. And so actually, that whole identity is totally erased, and you must all be, you know, this trans identity. And it's just, it's more cult-like than anything. So there's some solutions. One of the things on the next slide, what we do with Action for Canada is we educate. When you become powerful with the knowledge, you put it to practice and you speak intelligently with the same words, and we have done so much deep diving and research that you can use the words to disarm the arguments back, which are really just more rhetorical than they are based in any sort of substance or any science at all. Okay, so I just wanted to put those up there as an example. The next slide is just where you land. Okay, so on their website, if you go to political LGBTQ, we also have political Islam. We have things that have been politicized because it's a weaponization. And so it's a group of people that want to gain control and create division are making use of. So I just wanted you to see that if you're ever going to watch anything, those are the first two things to watch. Each one is about an hour long. Tanya has done a deep dive on the tools, and so I knew I didn't have a lot of time today, so I just wanted to blitz you with some places to go. The next one, the slide, there's a report here, Stop the Global Agenda to Use Children as Agents of Change. And so there's a link there. You'll be able to see that icon on our page. And it says whether it's political, trans, LGBT agenda, it's the critical race theory, it's the climate change propaganda, the agenda is to target children and use them as agents of change. They actually use that wording in so much of their literature. You're an agent. You know, you can make decisions for yourself without your parent, you yourself. And so I really want to say that the LGBT community has been hijacked by radical activists. That's what's happening. It's a hijacking of legitimate social advancement that might have been necessary. I don't really want to weigh in on that because it's not been my lived experience, right? But I'm just saying that maybe there's some legitimacy there that needed to have perhaps political solutions, perhaps otherwise, but we couldn't have the conversation because it got hijacked and it got put into this realm of the absurd. So I just wanted to kind of bring that out. They're also doing that with Indigenous people, so that you never get to the real issue. You can still have in Canada, you can have reserves that still don't have water. Like, what are you talking about caring for Indigenous people when you can't even get water, when we have like the second most abundant water sources in the world in this country? But anyway, again, I digress. So there are legitimate concerns, though, and significant objections to the ever-increasing amount of political propaganda associated with this LGBTQ2+ sex activist lobby initiated by the United Nations under the Comprehensive Sexual Education. And so they said that every member nation has to sign on to it. Well, we are a member nation. That's the problem. And it comes in at the top and it goes right down to the bottom. And this is how it comes in. So the next one here is the SOGI toolkits. Remember I said toolkits? Whenever you hear toolkits, start doing this, right? Or just be like, hold on a minute. Who built your toolkit and who put the tools in there? Like, who's the people? And what are you intending to do with your tools? So in BC, they have a SOGI toolkit. Here you can see on the slide, this one here is actually the Alberta-specific SOGI website. I'm just going to say to you, go there. Read their stuff. They will spell out exactly how they want to roll out the indoctrination. And it has nothing to do with some legitimate concerns. It has everything to do with, we need to move people from one belief system to another, and it has to be ours, right? So that's where you would go to find that. In Alberta, it's called PRISM. PRISM is a book. It's a resource that have ready-made plans for teachers. And so you're like, oh, I gotta deal with this SOGI, I gotta integrate it in everything I do, I don't have time for this, let's go get this resource. And then boom, there's not really due oversight on it because you're trying to check your boxes that you've been the right kind of teacher. And so that PRISM one, we're going to do a deep dive on that. On our website, we've done the deep dive on the BC SOGI toolkit, and we'll show you exactly where with highlighting, this is where the indoctrination is, and this is our commentary on it, and this is what we're going to be doing here with the PRISM toolkit. We have one for elementary, and we have one for high school. Now, this one says, toolkits for safe and caring discussions about sexual and gender minorities at the elementary level. Well, sex ed isn't even introduced in the curriculum until grade 4. Okay? So I know, I was a former teacher, it's not there, and it's puberty, it's the body changes, that's it. There's no other stuff added on. And when you see the little video on there, they'll say, oh, there's things that are left out of the curriculum and things that we can put into the curriculum. And so it's always this strapping on. Okay, so I'm gonna go through this phases. What can we do I wanna give you something. You must be educated. You can't just come and go, oh, here's Kim, the knowledge expert. I'm really sorry that I had to become a knowledge expert on this. But, and what we've been working on in Manitoba, no kidding, flip pornography. Okay, so like, I know, and I can show it to you if you don't believe me. And we do put it on our website so that behind screens, like I have it here, I have those books that you're saying, okay, there's not really pornography in school. I actually have to put it behind a cover that says, by the way, this is really sexually explicit, but this is in the school. There's one called Gender Queer, and that one actually shows a minor engaged in a sexual act, full on display, fully written, fully drawn, of a minor, presumably maybe with another minor. But that is a depiction of children involved in a sexual act. That is pornography. It's here in these pages. Okay? I'm sorry, but it's here. It's also on our website with a disclaimer. We don't want to be pushing pornography, obviously, but we want people to know that this is what's going on. So, be educated. We need people in Calgary. I've got a great team that started now with chapters across the country. Like I showed you that map. We have those little flags everywhere. Those are people groups. In every community, we want to get right across in every riding, federally and also in every municipality, so that we can get people who are like-minded who'll just put some boots on the ground and do one little action further to become aware and know the lingo to push back. Because there's more of us than there are of them. We just need to be encouraged that we can get together. So please come to our monthly meetings. We have them about the first of the month, and I send out an email to everybody in the Calgary area inviting people to get more of this information when I can go into more of a deeper dive. But we need people to send out those flyers, just education, just drop those flyers, put them in a druthers. I love druthers. And Trevor's here with his druthers. And so you put those into flyers and you just put them in, cafes. Just happen to leave the newspaper there and you can put a flyer that people go, oh, I didn't even know. And for example, did you know that there is a 4,500% increase in gender dysphoria with girls since 2018? A 4,500% increase in gender dysphoria for girls. Okay? So if you know the science of all of that, it was always typically boys and it was always younger, and they tended to resolve it, oftentimes going on to have a homosexual orientation later in life, but they would be okay in the skin that they were in by the time they made it through puberty. If you left them alone, supportive environment, but you weren't pushing anything on them, they just kind of resolved it. They lived in a healthy body without perpetual hormone replacements and such. So write letters. So when you know some stuff, if you do a deep dive on our website on this particular issue, start writing the letters. Start talking to the ministers and start talking to your writing MLAs as well. Serve a notice of liability, so we do have that document. It's also a way of educating the elected officials, because just like teachers, we're like, what's the SOGI? And you're left in a little bit like wondering, where does this come from? And you just don't feel like you have the knowledge, so you don't do anything about it. But if we can educate elected officials, we'll go, oh, I can find a way to make this better. And I think, definitely Premier Smith made those steps and those gestures towards that. It's our opinion that she needs to go further, and we need to get these NGOs, particularly SOGI, and it's run seriously by ATA. ATA was integral and involved with the development of that PRISM workbook, and Jason Schilling. Anyway, you can write letters of complaint. You can write letters of complaint to these organizations as well to say, what are you doing? Like, where's your science? Show it to me. You know, challenge them. Because if you don't challenge them, they'll just like, oh, nobody cares, so I'm just going to keep going and see if I can push the envelope. Okay, so social media, use it. When you see these comments and these news reports, interject your comment. And then say, oh, I know a resource for you. Here you go. And get involved in that. Research, evidence collection, we've heard about that. Find those books, find the evidence and say, this is not okay. Deliver packages. Equipping, come to meetings, request delegations, go to school board meetings, network with policymakers like we're doing, engage with elected officials. They're not the enemy, they are human too, and they need to be educated. So we can empower, we can meet with ministers, develop policy, public speaking, running for office, and serving in our communities. We have to get more engaged in our communities. So I just will go over that really quick. Yes, write NDP, write to them. Let them hear what you have to say and say, are you aware? I'm going to put this in the public record because most of them are sitting up in Edmonton, right? Edmonton's filled with NDP, so everybody in Edmonton should be writing to their elected official and telling what they think. Write to the ATA and say, come on, you know, what are you doing? Finally, wins, okay? So like I said, there's this global through the local. Guess what? We are winning across the country with the local pushing back the global. Because we can't take on everything. We can take on what we're most passionate about and what's right in front of us. So this team, this lovely 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 beautiful human beings in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, took on the SOGI as soon as they heard that SOGI was going to be rolled through the prairies, because, you know, Alberta's doing it, so I guess Saskatchewan has to do it. As soon as we heard that they were scheduled to have it roll out in the fall of last year, this team got together and was scurrying to get that information in the hands of policymakers. Lots of divine appointments for that to happen, including a 14-year-old boy taking home sex cards. Sex cards that were so kinky, A to Z, I couldn't get to D. Honestly. Almost 50 years old here, I'm like, I can't read anymore. And in the cards it says, oh, this is just for the LGBT youth. I'm like, forget LGBT. This isn't for any youth. Why are you targeting a particular group of people to sexualize them in the most debased way? And honestly, it was terrible, but it got trumped. It got, oh, maybe I shouldn't use that word. It got one-upped. It got one-upped in Manitoba. And so I just want to say that, in fact, Premier Moe and also then Education Minister Dustin Duncan, they pivoted right away. They responded to the people in Lumsden, a little conservative community that was outraged that these cards would even be there. Well, we knew that that wasn't the only time that it happened. It happened in BC, and it happened another time in Lower Mainland BC. And so, yeah, and it's here as well. Yeah. So they sneak them in because it's an agenda to just go, ooh, let me show you. It's kind of like, it is definitely a grooming technique. Okay, last but not least, oh, this is at the bottom here. I just wanted to, can you go back to the last slide, and then this is it. The last slide at the bottom, it says a petition. Petition to end porn distribution in Manitoba schools. So if you go home tonight, I know it's going to be a little distressing for some of you maybe to see it, but it is full on gay pornography set in the context of Indigenous awareness. So they are putting all of these vulnerable people groups together, and they are exploiting it. The person in it is definitely a younger looking man and an older man. So you've got that pedophilic relationship as well. And so literally 58 pages to show how to put a condom on, apparently. That was the educational reason to put it in there. You flip the pages, and it's animated, it's a cartoon, but when you flip the pages, the entire sex act is animated for you. That was in Verdun Institute in Verdun, Manitoba, total conservative neighborhood. And it got slipped in there because an organization called CERC, Sexual Education and Resource Center of Manitoba, has an agenda. They're not governmental, but they are paid for by Canada Health and also Manitoba government. So yes, the principal is mortified, so are many of the trustees, and we've been in contact with them, mortified, and that not just because they're Christian, I don't even know if they are necessarily, I'm thinking they might be, but it wasn't them necessarily, but the oversight wasn't in, it just got slipped in. You see it, there was a whole device that could be taken home, and again, a 16-year-old boy, thank goodness for teenagers. I taught them for like 21 years, and especially those boys are like, ooh, I'm gonna snag that. So it was on display, and all the books were free for everybody, but also there was a phallic device to show how to put a condom on. And that got to be taken home. Like, that literally happened in a school. It literally happened. So please go there, do the deep dive, you'll see on that. And then last but not least there, Rise Up Canada. Rise up parents and leaders. There's some of you out here, I know that. From all faith groups and backgrounds, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for the good men to do nothing. Edmund Burke. Join organizations who are working to make the difference. Volunteer, donate, write letters. Thank you from the team of Action for Canada. Protecting rights and freedoms. Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. So let's bring that back in.
There's a lot of information there. I don't know that I have enough hours in the day to sit at my computer and watch those videos, but it seems that one needs to take the time. One needs to take that moment when they were going to do something else and actually educate yourself about the situation. I want to just, I'm going to draw something a little different out of what she said, and I want to talk about the ATA. And I know this is a verboten topic because they're incredibly influential. And you said someone's name at the ATA. Can you say it out loud again?
Jason Schilling, president of ATA.
So there is a political action committee at the ATA. The guy's name is Kent. Kent phoned here to this cinema and threatened Natalie's business. And they threatened other school teachers that they had to withdraw their events from this cinema in the month of April. And that is a very big event because they play a movie here, there's popcorn involved. It's a big ticket item for Natalie. So what I would like you to do tomorrow is I would like you to phone the ATA office. And I would like you to call out Kent. And I would like you to call them out like the cowards that they are, that they're trying to choke the life out of a small business for speaking up for families and for parents. So that's tomorrow. Call the ATA. The guy's name is Kent.
I know him. I just want to say this. When I was still teaching, the ATA used the Calgary Board of Education website, internal mail, to send their propaganda when it was time to vote for NDP. So they are so in the tank for NDP. And the third-party relationship, there's a lot of funny business there. So I'm just saying, yeah.
That did not come from me as the president of Calgary Law UCP.
There you go. I was a member, and I'm like, I don't support any of this, and why is my members' dues going for it? I had no choice. I was a teacher, so.
Okay, big round of applause for Kim McBride. Kent, ATA. All right, just in case you forgot his name is Kent, and he's at the ATA. Our next speaker is really a gentleman who is pushing hard for the rights of parents. And I know for the God-fearing people that are here that you feel that it is your right as a parent, under the eyes of God, that you have the absolute authority over your child, which I totally agree with. But you have to realize that there are creeping agendas. Again, UN something or other, whatever that was, unsustainable. I thought that was so relevant. But you got to realize that where we're going now, sometimes the obvious needs to be pointed out. Kent at the ATA. I won't mispronounce Kent's name ever again. Please join me in welcoming Mr. John Hilton-O'Brien for Parents for Choice in Education. Now, John is a philosopher. That is why we are going to start a clock. And at 22 minutes, I will hold up the sign that says John 22 minutes. He is a captivating speaker. He has so much wealth and knowledge, but it can go on a long time. But it's incredibly informative. So I'll get off the stage. John, take it away.
Thank you, Darrell. A friend of mine was standing on her doorstep and she saw a couple of children going by on the sidewalk. There was a girl about age 14, a boy about age 13, and the girl was trying to explain to the boy what pansexual meant, because they'd been taking it up in school. But that wasn't really what interested her. What really caught her notice was the much younger girl a dozen paces back, who was skipping along, and she clearly wanted their attention. She wanted to be part of the group. And she was saying, "I'm bi, 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 bi." Now, we can learn a few things about that. Please advance a couple of, there we go, advance one more, please. There we go. So, we can understand a couple of things from this. And the first thing that we can understand is that when you do comprehensive sex education, it's not a scalpel. It's a sledgehammer. You're not getting that particular kid in that particular class. And you know, we're going to come back to it, but that's dangerous. It's going to get all of the kids, and there's going to be unforeseen consequences. So in this talk today, I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about some of the other culture wars issues, okay? I'm then going to turn to what I think of as the real problems, the underlying issue, and I'm going to wrap up by talking about what we can do. And every so often you'll see me go like this, which is a sign to advance the slide, or this when I think it's gone a little too far. So that sex education thing. The American Psychological Association tells us that they did a specific study on sexualization when it came up some years ago in the context of sexuality in the cinema and on television. And they said that it's very harmful. In effect, they said, it has the same effect as child abuse. And in fact, when you see comprehensive sex education done, it becomes a little harder to sort out the kids that are actually being abused sexually from those who simply have gotten too much information in the classroom. And in fact, it develops a situation that's rather similar to gender dysphoria. In other words, we're creating the very situation that we're trying to solve. And it isn't just what's going on in the classrooms either. As Action for Canada has pointed out, there are in fact books that are sexually explicit in school classrooms, in school libraries. Those two books up there are from Action for Canada's list, and our volunteers have found them in Calgary Public Libraries, Calgary Public School Boards, school libraries in this city. Those are on the shelves. And yes, they are sexually explicit. So, part of what I have to tell you about this, and I'll return to this, is that the people who want to talk about gender dysphoria in the classroom, the people who want to get into children's heads to adjust their identity, are teachers. They're not social workers. I'm a social worker by trade, although I'm no longer registered. And it's my profession that mostly deals with this sort of deep counseling, and I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. For starters, I'd need 2 more years of education. I'd need to have at least an MSW, and 3,000 practice hours, supervised practice hours, before I could dream of doing that sort of psychotherapy that's needed here. If I was in psychology, I would need to have a PhD plus 3,000 hours of supervised practice time. Competence is an issue here. The people who want to talk about this stuff are not competent to deliver the services they're talking about. Let's move on. So, we mentioned the prison toolkits. You know, they come in elementary and secondary editions in Alberta. And here's the most important part. This is what they tell you. You know that law that says if you're going to teach about sexuality, gender, and religion in the classroom, you have to inform parents and get their consent?
Yeah.
The law says no such fool thing. What the law actually says is this: if and only if the primary stated purpose of that lesson is to talk about gender, sexuality, or religion, then and only then do you need to inform parents, let alone get their consent. And the rest of the book is full of lesson plans in which the stated purpose is one thing. The contents, however, are all about sexuality and gender. My favorite is the one for a high school religion class that is entitled, How Homophobia Leads Us into Sin. I don't think I need to elaborate any further than that. Let's move on. So, then we have secrecy policies, right? These were brought to us by Ms. Notley, but the Gay-Straight Alliances being mandatory in any school where a single child asks for them, those are still in the legislation. They're in the Education Act, section 35.1. A school club isn't subject to those reporting requirements. It doesn't matter what they do. They don't have to tell the parents they're going to talk about sexuality. And Calgary Public and roughly half of our school boards in Alberta to this day still have a secrecy policy that says all you can say is that the school has such a club. That's it. So Calgary Public, among other school boards in Alberta, is protecting teachers who are going to teach about education on sexuality, and they don't have to tell parents at all. All they have to do is run a club. So, let's move on. Oh, yes. Look, I've got a confession to make. I mentioned I was a social worker by trade. In fact, I was trained by one of Saul Alinsky's disciples, if you happen to know who that is. And I use critical theory whenever I'm practicing. Because here's what critical theory was meant for. It tells me that, say I'm a principal in a school, and I have a student whose mother is recently divorced, well, maybe not even that recently, but her husband was physically abusive to her, and in fact did jail time for it, and she is the custodial parent. She's been abused, and I'm not going to duplicate the circumstances. So I'm not going to sit there and lecture her, right? I'm certainly not going to bring in her husband to support me and tell her how wrong she is. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to try to give her power over her life. And I'm going to be listening to her. I won't duplicate that oppression. But that's not what's happening here. critical theory is used in the classroom to say, you students, you need to give up your power. And the person saying it is the only person in the room who has any power. It's a complete abuse of critical race theory. Now, it's not that the people doing this are bad people. They don't mean to do harm, but they're not competent. This is a very high-level theory in social work and in philosophy that we're trying to adapt to people who aren't trained in those fields and are trying to adopt it on the fly in a classroom with 27 kids. And the people who are selling them on it have an agenda. So what are we getting? We're getting diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a great idea. It's a very fancy philosophical idea. And ideally, it will free people. But that's not how it's being done. What we get instead is a program. We get to pay some very special people a lot of money to have more power. And we as administrators also get power because we get to give away that budget and have these people dependent on us. This is political pornography. We are exploiting the image of vulnerable people to gain money and power for ourselves. It needs to end. So here's what it all comes down to. In Alberta right now, there are 20,000 people in home education. There's 40,000 people in private schools. There's over 10,000 people in charter schools. That's 73,000 people, a 136% rise over 20 years ago, and I assure you that our public schools have not increased in their enrollment by anything like that. What's more, when we look at charter schools, they have to keep track of how many people are on wait lists. And last time we had a look at that, there were 10,000 students in charter schools and 20,000 on the wait list. Our funding manual makes it hard for private schools to admit new people, and it's quite possible that private schools have a similar number of people waiting to get in. And I've joked in print that the only reason the public schools are still viable is that parents literally can't leave fast enough. The reason why Smith is talking about the policy she is that she has to restore trust in our institutions by parents. Okay? That's what it's about. It's not that she's some big social conservative. It's just that she's doing some statecraft because it has to be done. If we don't, we stand to lose those institutions. So what's the cause of it? Oh, wait, back one. Back one. Oh, go 2 forward, please. 2 forward. We need an elephant. We're missing an elephant. Okay. The elephant in the room is this. I guess we've somehow missed it. Just go back one, please. The elephant in the room is that Alberta's education budget is $9.8 billion with a B for 760,000 students total, including those homeschoolers who are only getting $1,800 and some for it. Maybe. Well, that means your average classroom of 27 kids is getting $345,000 as an expense. Please back the slide up one. And the teacher is earning $80,000 of that. That means we are spending less than 25% of our money on education on the actual staff. And if you can point me to a profit-making company that does a similar thing, I will drive over with all my friends and beg them to take my money as an investment, because they are clearly making money hand over fist. So where's it going? And here's the answer. Calling it the blob isn't new. This is a crusading education minister from the UK called Michael Gove who came up with this one. Here's how it works. We've got the Alberta Teachers Association. We've got bureaucrats in the Ministry of Education in Edmonton, and here in Calgary Public we've got 2 levels of administration beyond the schools. We also have the faculties of education, and we have various and sundry activist organizations, some of whom can contribute to 600 phone calls and emails. So how does this work? Well, let's see. The teachers' union makes a deal with those levels of bureaucracy to get funding, not only for their teachers to get paid, but for themselves to get paid to do the training for further education. The faculties of education get in on that business because they're hired as consultants, but they're also called upon for their expertise to justify those salaries and the bureaucrats. And it's going to involve the activists, who are sometimes members of the other organizations, but they're paid as some sort of consultants for all of them. They come out to address teachers' conventions. They get brought into the bureaucracy as consultants. It's a very cozy system. These people are their own constituents. Why would a bureaucrat listen to you as a parent when he should clearly be listening to the expert in the Faculty of Education and to the person from the ATA? They're an echo chamber. They're not just an echo chamber, though. That echo chamber has a lock on it, and there's an armed guard out front. And they're completely stunned if a parent happens to find her way in there and start talking. And that's what's happened to us. So, I'm sure everyone has heard what a terrible job Mr. Kinney did on the curriculum. And you've heard that because the ATA spent $1.1 million as a third-party advertiser back in 2021. Why would the ATA spend $1 million on this? I mean, aside from noticing, hey, our terms of reference forbid us from endorsing a candidate or political party, but it's surprisingly quiet about opposing one. Well, there's a reason. There's actually 3 reasons. The first is that Ms. Notley had made them a deal. She signed a memorandum of understanding that said the bureaucracy of the ATA would be the people who developed the new curriculum, and they would be well paid for doing so. Mr. Kinney tore that up, and they were very disappointed. Money and prestige had gone away from them. And then, of course, there's the Faculty of Education. But to understand the Faculty of Education, you'd better understand something else. Who's heard of John Dewey? How many of you went to a school that used the Dewey Decimal System? Hey, there's a big dude. Would you believe he did most of his work in the 1890s? He's kind of dated, isn't he? Well, he didn't really get fully adopted until the 40s and 50s. And the reason is that he made a happy mistake. He misread an ancient writer called Plato to mean that children actually know absolutely everything. Everything. All you have to do is pull it out of them by helping them to explore their environment. You need to be a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage. And what this means is that educational methods became a field of study as important as mathematics or literature. Because before we had what we called the normal school, it was sort of like training a plumber or electrician. We took people who'd gotten some university, we trained them to be teachers. It was done at SAIT, actually. Well, under the new schema, though, this justified a faculty of education, not even a department. A faculty is like a little university. There's a dean, there's multiple department chairs, there are staff galore just to support it. There is money and prestige abounding. Because skills are key. And so our traditional curriculum, or what passes for traditional here, it's 50 years old or so, is the skill-based curriculum. And Kenny had a different idea. He'd read E.D. Hirsch, that's one of his books there on the screen. Hirsch is the sort of guy who wires electrodes up to your head to see what happens when you learn things. And Hirsch demonstrated quite convincingly with dozens of schools that if you simply force feed the kids actual content, their scores just improve remarkably. Their ability to learn gets better. It's in much the same way that if you want a cat to get better with its claws, you buy it a scratching post. Same principle, really. And for Hirsch, content is king. And so what Mr. Kenny was attempting to do was a Hirschian reform, a content-based curriculum. And so that's why the faculties of education lined up to shout him down. And their allies in the ATA, likewise, although they had their own reasons for pecuniary interest. So that's what it's about. This is about ambition. And I'm afraid to tell you, this is coming back. We're going to have more debates over curriculum in the near future. And then there's this argument people are making, particularly children's advocates, so self-proclaimed sometimes, saying that, well, no, you shouldn't tell parents when a kid transitions socially, because the child has a right to privacy. Let me translate that argument. What they're really saying is, I, as an agent of the state, shall exercise the rights of the child against the parent. Now, if you read our treaties like the UN Declaration on Human Rights, you will find that they foresee the parent exercising the rights of the child against the state. What these people are doing is pure subversion. It is, again, political pornography. They're using the image of the children to get power and prestige for themselves. In fact, the ATA has a legal document on their website. Well, it's a piece of legal advice telling teachers that in old times, teachers acted in loco parentis as agents of the parents, but now they act in parens patriae, that is, as agents of the state. It's the same sort of status that's given to prison guards. That does remind me of my junior high school, mind you. And more importantly, to the social worker who seizes children from a home. That reminds me, we do sometimes extinguish a parent's custodial rights in the case of abuse. But we do it with great soul searching, don't we? And a very open and transparent process in the courts. But the people who are saying, oh, children have the right to privacy, are using that to say they don't have to have an open and transparent process. that they can extinguish your rights without due process. They are simply out of line. Let's move on. You know, $1.1 million from the AT, those are beginner's numbers in this game. Take Calgary's Future. It was a collection of public service unions that made a third-party advertiser. Calgary's Future, they put together $1.7 million, and that buys a lot of future, I gotta tell you. They endorsed people for every seat on council, they endorsed someone for mayor, they endorsed someone for every seat on the public school board. And nobody that they didn't endorse got on. Wow. The ATA wasn't alone. Health Services also spent some money in 2021. And I cannot help but notice that under the NDP's constitution, any union can have a seat on the provincial council, and the NDP will not disclose what unions have a seat. In fact, their Labour caucus elects 2 members to their executive of 7 people. 2 seats. The leader has 1 of the 7 seats. That tells you how powerful the unions are in the ATA. And so when I say that it sometimes seems like the NDP have used our school boards as a farm team, I say that in the sense that the Harlem Globetrotters once came to my high school, and that was a farm team game. We got dunked on pretty hard. So let's talk about what you can do. Let's talk about advocating for your children, educational pluralism, and local elections. So, advocating for your children. There's some things I need to tell you about. And the first is that advocacy starts with a respectful relationship. If the first time you're talking to your children's teacher is to complain about something, or to tell them your political ideals, you are not going to advocate effectively for your children. What I'm going to tell you is really a very simple piece of advice. It's stolen from social work. What you need is unconditional positive regard. And the simplest route there is to look at that person that you're interacting with, get her to talk for a bit, and find a reason to like her. There is no substitute for this. It will color all of your interactions. And try to find a way to help that person with what they're doing. You can be funny about it. You can make suggestions. You can offer to bring resources or hunt things down for them. But often, we don't get our way. And sometimes you're going to have to escalate things to the next level. Now, the way you do that is that you never, ever make a threat. Not implied, not at all. What you do say is, if I can't get that resolved here, I'm going to have to take that to the next level, which is to the principal, then to the area educational lead, and then to the superintendent's office, and from there to the minister. And you need to explain that to them before you close the discussions. Give them one last chance to come back to you with something before you escalate. But once having said that you will escalate, you must follow through, or no one will ever believe you again. So these are the basic techniques of advocacy. Let's move on. I'm going to talk very briefly about the pillars of educational pluralism, the pillars of choice, if you will. So in the first place, Alberta is the poster child for selection in education. We have public schools. The public schools often, as Calgary does, have many, many special programs. We have Catholic schools, same deal. We also have our private schools, our charter schools, and various shades of home education, in addition to Francophone schools. That's a lot of choice. But sometimes it isn't quite as much choice as we think. You see, it isn't enough to slap a cross on a school and say that that's a Christian school. One of the funnier things that ever happened to me was the fellow who was the chair for religious education for Calgary Catholic back in the 90s had his religious education program sent back to him by the province. And they said, "This is too Catholic. Please redo it with a focus on world religions." And you certainly can't say that one of them is better than another. We go farther than that. Section 35.1 of the Education Act. If a single child asks for it, there shall be a gay-straight alliance in your school. It shall be called a gay-straight alliance. Sorry, statement of faith? No, you don't get to say that. Islamic school? No, you've got to have a gay-straight alliance. We don't care if it's inconsistent with your religion. We definitely need to have an exemption, at least for the religious schools, for that one. And while we're at it, talking about having those schools, maybe we'd better talk about finance. Our current funding documents, it's 209 pages of doublespeak. They're hiring grant writers to be able to manage their schools for the year just to get through our funding document. Oh, and guess what? Those big jurisdictions, they can hire better grant writers and more of them, and they can game the system. Oh, we could possibly code this child and that child and get extra funding for them. We'll say that we're doing something for them, we'll do a token, but we won't actually spend the money on it. Instead, we'll hire more DEI consultants. Okay? And then there's the curriculum. Now, I disagree with Mr. Hirsch on one thing. Mr. Hirsch would have us completely fill that curriculum so there isn't one spare minute of the day. But I think we need to make a little room, a little time, for local interests. Right? A farming community out near Cardston is not going to have the same interests as downtown Calgary. And those religious schools are going to have a different perspective than the public schools. We need to make room in that curriculum for it. And finally, we need to ensure that parental authority is respected. When a school says they're going to do a seminar on consent in sexual relations, and then they do that consent form for the parents as an opt-out, they're blowing the whole sexual consent thing. Because if people who are at a party do sexual consent as an opt-out, that consists of the man saying, but she didn't say no. So we have to end the hypocrisy on that at least. So move on. Local elections. You know, those unions have a lot of power. But they have power because we don't vote. Give me a show of hands. How many of you voted in the last school election? Be honest now. You are very unusual people. Most rooms I talk to don't even know the name of their school trustee. And that's just the truth. And that's on us. That's on us to get engaged. But not entirely. A big part of the reason we don't vote is we don't know who we're voting for. Because honest to goodness, those campaigns are so bad, right? This constituency association that I'm addressing, they would be embarrassed if they ever mounted campaigns like we do for school board. Let's face it, okay? And if we mount a good campaign and if people come out, we're going to find that the unions can only bring out so many people and nobody else in the world wants to vote for them. We do not want the unions in power. Any well-run campaign is going to win. And that's the simple truth of it. And I'm going to address one thing to those of you who are in charters or whose children are in charter schools, private schools, or home educated. You have the right to run for school board, let alone the right to vote. People often get confused on this. Don't be confused. And not only do you have the right to run for school board or to vote, but you need to do it. So let's move on. Okay? So I want you to support Parents for Choice in Education. And I want you to do it in a number of ways. Now, first off, we're going to be doing more training on local elections. That image is the textbook for the course. We typically do Friday evening on how to be a good trustee and how to find someone who would be a good candidate for school trustee. Saturday mornings is electioneering, and Saturday afternoons is talking about issues and what you're going to talk about on the campaign trail. We also spend a little time coaching people on advocacy, whole groups sometimes, and we do a lot of writing. If you go out to our table out in the lobby, you'll find a whole stack of literature on different issues, and you'll find a sign-up sheet for our regular newsletter, which comes out roughly quarterly. We don't usually email people unless we've got something to say. So I'd encourage you to go do that. We're supported by people like you. We don't get our money from corporations or from the government. And above all, I want you to remember to get involved in politics. You're doing the right thing coming here and getting involved with a political party. Because you're doing more than voting. You're actually getting out, and that's what counts. And I'd like you to do that now with the school boards too. Thank you very much, folks.
"27 minutes. Kent, ATA. Let's go to the next slide. John, you know, it's interesting. Your talk is full of humor, but also truths that we're trying to get through. And I was expecting, when I put out this call for the event tonight, that I would get hundreds and hundreds of emails, and that those emails would be across a broad section of interests, and that they would be satisfying. I got three questions. They're all for John. So Let's go ahead to question period, somewhere here. Keep going, keep going, keep going, we'll come to that. One more. There you go. Okay, here we go. So, just by the way, Rob and Blaine, Global TV will be waiting for you when you go out the door. Just a heads up, so you guys are ready to go out there together. Okay.
Run.
I'm just trying to prepare everybody for what's about to happen. The CBC did not call. I just want you all to know they had no interest in you. I'm just saying. So, John, here's the 3 questions. First of all, are you involved in advising the government on upcoming parental rights legislation?
Not directly.
You ought to grab that mic. Yeah. It's a good mic, but very good.
Well, we're not directly or formally involved, but I get the feeling that they sometimes read our columns.
Well, when I was at the AGM, you were at the AGM, I thought that there was a certain vindication for Parents for Choice in Education with the overwhelming support that the UCP members had for parental rights. Did you not get that feeling?
I certainly did, and I'm happy to say that I did help to draft some of that, some of those motions.
Yeah, so I guess one of the points that I want to make about Calgary Lougheed, and a lot of people ask me this question and they don't think it's true. Our idea in Calgary Lougheed is to engage the community in meaningful ways, and we see it not only inside the borders of Calgary Lougheed, but across the city, Alberta. We want to be that opportunity to be an advocate for those policies of the party that so many of our members have voted for. But we also have this sense of accountability. And the Premier will know I've asked her questions that are sharp and to the point. I once interviewed her for 90 minutes and asked her 62 questions. Some of you might have seen that. But the question really is, how can we hold the government accountable to actually follow through with the legislation?
Well, the first step, of course, is that some of you are on the actual constituency association, and the rest of you know some people on that constituency association, and you have the ability to sit your MLA down, that's Mr. Eric Bouchard, and say, Mr. Bouchard, we want you to go and talk with the Premier and with the Education Minister. And this is what we want you to tell them about. And that's the first thing that you get to do. And that's pretty darn direct. The next thing that you get to do is you get to go to the annual general meeting, and a surprisingly small number of people can put together a proposal for that meeting, a policy proposal, and if it is well written and well argued, it can win.
And we did.
Oh yes, you certainly did.
And just so everyone knows, we have representatives today from Calgary Southeast here. We have Calgary Buffalo, Calgary Mountain View, Calgary Fish Creek, Calgary Curry, Calgary Northwest. We have people from Highwood that are here. So again, appealing broadly is important because we do not operate in silos. If I've heard anything from all the speakers, from Blaine to Kim to Torry to John, is that by educating yourself, by engaging and asking questions, you are doing something valuable for your children. Okay? The real point is the responsibility for being a parent is the parents. It's not the states, it's the parents. But if you abdicate your rights to the ATA, or you abdicate your rights to other government agencies, then you are at fault and you need to be held accountable. And this is what happens when we don't vote. It's the same, similar, not the same, it's a similar situation. We don't engage because we don't like the loud person, we don't like the quiet person, we don't like the person who has an opinion that's not mine, we don't like. But your point on advocacy is you need to learn and understand, work with people, have a community, have the conversations one at a time. So do you have any suggestions for how to approach teachers who insist on sneaking gender ideology into their teaching?
Well, unfortunately, if they really insist on doing it, it's very hard to stop them. Very hard. The principal can't tell them not to use the PRISM toolkit, right? Nobody really can. But I do have an evil plot for you if you want.
A conspiracy theory. Please, go ahead.
Well, it's not a theory at all.
Oh,
It's
so
just straight up conspiracy.
Okay, so it's not a historical reenactment?
So here's the conspiracy. Frequently, the same teacher who is trying to slip the weird stuff in is teaching both social studies and English literature. Now, the school is paid based on the number of butts and seats on September 30th. And supposing you were to opt your child out of social studies and English literature, maybe you decided that you were going to do it at home because you can make that arrangement to teach just some of your subjects at home. Or if you're really going to be mean to them, you say, we're going to do this by distance education with a different school board. And someone else will teach social studies and literature. And you make that decision on September, say, 29th. And all your friends make that decision on September 29th. Then the school principal is walking through the school and checking in the classrooms, and then, why is only a third of the class in your classroom, ma'am? I have no idea. So you go in as a principal and you go and you check your numbers and you find out two things. First, all those kids transferred out to do those specific two classes by distance education. And secondly, in the funding manual, when a child takes 2 classes by distance education, the school that they're otherwise going to loses funding by that amount, and it's transferred to the other school.
So you're talking technique, not conspiracy theory.
A pure evil, actually.
Okay, just check.
Because I'm pretty sure that things aren't going to go well for that teacher when reviews come up.
So the point is engagement. It's a point of action and it's a point of advocacy. And you can use the gentle hand or you can use something more like a stick. And at some point in time, John pointed out there was levels of escalation. And you have to not be afraid of it, but you also have to be effective with it. Okay? You will exhaust yourself if you don't do it properly. But there are a great number of resources for people who want to know how to go through the process.
Quite so. A couple of years ago, actually, a pair of parents in one school district came to me with this problem about the weird parental consent notice that went out for the seminar on sexual consent for their students. And they weren't making any headway with the principal or district, so we made fun of them in print, and that eventually got some action. And in fact, that may be reflected in some of the Premier's proposed policies to do with opt-in consent.
That's a good idea. So here's a little task for you if you're a parent or a grandparent. Suggest to your son or daughter who happens to have the kids in school. For those of you who are viewing at home, think of it this way. Ask to tour the school with the principal and count the number of Canadian flags. Okay? I'm just saying. We have a customer in our store who came in the other day, and obviously he knew about the parental rights town hall, and he says, you know, I had the most fascinating experience in my daughter's school, and she's in grade 4. Okay, so that's elementary, I guess, elementary school. And I said, well, what happened? He says, well, I went around and I counted the number of flags with the principal. And there were 4 Canadian flags in the school. There's 600 kids, okay? and there's 35 pride flags. So, simple observation on your part also brings the attention to what sort of things should have symmetry. And I'm not suggesting that there shouldn't be pride flags. I'm just saying that the symmetry and the disproportionate balance between that is something that you as a parent and grandparent should engage. And it's easy because it's visual. Curriculum, much more complicated. But the idea of that creeping conversation, those sidebar, anecdotal curriculum items that come in there, you really have to be careful. So I'd just like you all to thank all of our guests that are here tonight. Blaine Badiuk, thank you for being here. Torry Tanner, McBride, and John Hilton-O'Brien. Thank you all for coming tonight. 2 announcements, just in case you hadn't signed the Recall Gondak petition. We will have a number of people outside in the lobby awaiting your signatures. If you need a list of reasons, just ask my wife. She has it down to a science now. In fact, she starts with, so which one of these 13 appeals to you? And wouldn't you know, most people under the first 5 or 8 or 10, well, this one, oh, this one, the menorah, that got me. Ooh, the napkin ban. Oh, I can go anywhere and build an 8-plex. By the way, I really like that one because I have a really big lot. So we're going to build like a 12-plex. And I'd like to say my house is right next to Gondak's, but it's not. But wouldn't it be cool to buy the properties on both sides and build up? Just a thought. I mean, going back to your conspiracy. So there's that. Am I missing anything else?
Kent is here.
Oh, Kent, ATA. So the moral of the story is something I want you to read. This is the book right here. It's called The Linger, Rails, and Combustons. It's $20. It's a brilliant work of fiction. There's no pornography in this book, I will tell you. But it is intriguing. I encourage you to get it from Brendan. Brendan's back there. You can buy them for him. He is a veteran, a military veteran, who stood up for his rights and was abruptly kicked out. So we all know what the implication of that means. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for supporting Calgary Lockheed.